there's a lot going on right now folks may not be aware of when it comes to redistricting. And folks may not even know it's happening in New York. Folks might think, oh, it's happening in these, purple states or these red states, but it's really happening in New York. So for folks who don't know, please break it down for us.
Yeah, absolutely. So every 10 years, we complete the census. And based on those census numbers, that tells us whether we gained population or whether we lost people in our population. So we just did a census in 2020. And based on those numbers, it tells us whether we are going to gain congressional seats based on an increase in population or lose congressional seats based on a decrease. What we found in New York is that we are losing 1 seat because our population went down, even though my district actually went up in certain areas, which is very, very good. So because we're going to lose a seat, congressional districts are going to shift, and not just congressional, but Senate, state Senate districts, assembly districts, and city council districts. So there's an independent commission who released draft maps on what that's going to look like. It's just a draft, it's not final. But what needs to happen now is people need to provide testimony to share why they want their district to remain a certain way or change a certain way. So that testimony can be done online or it can be done in person. And my staffer who's on the call can drop those links in the chat so people know where to go. Because this is huge. Oftentimes, to your point, we don't know what's going on, so we don't provide testimony. And then what happens is the state government does it to us instead of with us. So by January 15th, the commission is going to come out with another draft, and then we see where we are. But by January 15th or so, we should know what the new lines are going to be.
And Rep. Bowman, how does this affect Black and brown voters?
So the draft maps in my district in particular decreased the percentage of Black and brown voters by 7% and increased the percentage of white voters by 23%.
Wow.
So that right there will change the complete demographic of our district, which would, like it or not, force me to govern differently because I would have to meet the needs of my new constituents differently. Theoretically, if our Black voters were to remain together in a congressional district, not just mine, but any congressional district, it gives you a stronger voice in Congress related to the issues that matter most to Black and brown people. And this is why, like during this process, Black and brown people got to provide testimony, because that testimony provides evidence of this is a community of interest. It's important to keep them together so that they can use their collective voice in Congress under whoever the representative is.
So let me ask you this. I remember talking about the census and advocating the importance of filling out the census. Did these numbers go down because some of us didn't fill out that census? Is that why the numbers went down?
So the short answer is yes. That's why the numbers went down. I mean, many people do not want to give information to the census or give any information to the government at all because there's a lack of trust, and that's a whole nother conversation. But this time it may have been even worse because Trump was fear-mongering the Latinx community and the immigrant community around filling out the census. He had people believing that if they filled out the census, they may be visited upon by ICE or immigration enforcement. So that fear mongering, I think, worked in many areas. But I also think, like, now that I'm an elected official, we have to do a better job of engaging the community and not just filling out the census, but building trust, rebuilding public trust, and building relationships with their government. And because we don't do that very well, people are standoffish. So you don't fill out the census, numbers go down, you lose a seat, and then things change. filling out the census is part of your democratic responsibility, and it's a part of your power, and it helps to bring additional resources into your district. So whether it's housing or healthcare, education, like, we got to make sure that we are using our voice and using our power by any means necessary, and the census is one big part of that.
Rep Bowman, we talked about it a lot on these airwaves that when you don't fill that census out, it may affect your local hospital. It'll affect funding. It's I talk about voting a lot, but there's so many tools in the toolbox, and one of those it really is the census. All right, so when you say an independent commission on redistricting, I get nervous when I hear independent commission. So what does that mean? What is that commission going to do? And how should we keep our just eyes open on this independent commission?
Yeah, so it's pretty much 50-50. Democrats and Republicans, excuse me, Democrats and Republicans chose the people to be on this commission in a 50-50 way, so that it can be like nonpartisan, right? We could really look at objectively the needs of communities of interest. But what you see by the first draft is, they didn't really take communities of interest into account. What they did was just decide, okay, we're losing a seat up north, so we're just going to move everyone north. Done deal. But that's not how it's supposed to go. And this independent commission should engage consistently with the community, which is what's happening now with testimony. And that's why testimony is so, so key. Your voice is the testimony, in person and online. Please make it heard. And if the commission doesn't respond to the testimony properly in terms of how they draw the maps, then the state legislature can decide to vote against the maps, vote them down, and then draw the lines themselves. Now, if you're a Democrat in this state where we have a supermajority, that could be a good thing. But again, the biggest thing is everyone in Black and brown communities specifically engaging the commission, engaging state legislatures to constantly ask questions about what's happening with redistricting. Because if we don't engage, like I said before, it's going to be done to us and not with us.
We're going to post the link on social media, but for folks out there listening, it is nyirc.gov, and you can just go on the website, submit your testimony. You can also get information on in-person testimonies that you can do, nyirc.gov. All right, so let me ask you this. Every single day, I get folks calling onto this show saying, I am tired of the Democrats. They're not doing anything. Nothing is getting done. I lay out some things that have been done that I think are really important. The child tax credit, President Biden appointing more Black women to the U.S. Appeals Court in his first year than any other president in history. There's been some really powerful executive orders. But Rep Bowman, folks are just telling me they feel disenchanted. They don't understand why we didn't get the George Floyd Policing Act, why we don't have voting rights, why there isn't student loan forgiveness. That's an easy one. I don't really get that. But I see people getting frustrated. They're getting disappointed. And I know we have Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema. They are Dixiecrats to me in the Senate. But I bring up your name a lot. I said there are people in there who are fighting every day. But what do you say to Black voters right now, where regardless of some of the receipts that are there, they just feel like nothing is happening and they don't feel motivated for these midterms next year?
Well, first of all, they should feel disenchanted because the Democratic Party hasn't done a good enough job of engaging Black and brown voters, really understanding what their needs and concerns are, and listening to them and properly communicating to them. So that there's a good reason to be disenchanted. Yes, Democrats have delivered on lifting 50% of children out of poverty through December with the child tax credit, and now we're close to making it permanent, which would be huge. The American Rescue Plan delivered $130 billion to K-12 schools. School districts like Detroit's school district that has been neglected for so long received $1 billion. New York City received 5.1 billion. So that was huge. Rent relief was huge as part of the American Rescue Plan as well, to keep people in their homes and keep people from being evicted. And you're talking about us in Congress fighting, Cory Bush occupying the Capitol steps and forcing Biden to extend the eviction moratorium so no one can be evicted from their homes. That lasted a couple of weeks before the Supreme Court shot it down. So we've done a lot, but what we haven't done very well is engage around voting rights, engage around the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, explain what the hell happened there, get feedback so that the White House can do things better and differently. I mean, for George Floyd to die the way it did, without ceremony, without explanation, after the whole world rose up last year against, police violence, it's unconscionable, man, and there's reason to be frustrated. The other thing I'll say is this, with regard to voting rights is one example. Policy, like it's like making sausage, right? It's not an appealing process to observe, but the sausage is pretty good once it's completed. And that's a lot like governing and negotiating, especially with people who aren't on the same page with you. Like it doesn't happen quickly. Sometimes it takes a lot of time. And, to be fair, like I've only been in Congress 10 months. President's only been in office 10 months. I mean, even, and I didn't say this, but the vaccine rollout and distribution, and how many lives were saved there, right? So, things take a little bit longer than we want them to. I'm hearing good things about the Build Back Better Act today. So I'm hoping this week something big is about to come from that. But we got to go right back to the table on voting rights, on immigration reform, on justice and policing. And then I'll say this, and sorry for the long answer, but I'm going to say this last part is very important. It's important for people to not just vote and send us off to do a job. It's important for everyone to remain engaged with us and with Congress, because it provides support, accountability, and pressure to make sure things are moving in the direction they need to be moving in. And then finally, we shouldn't have been negotiating with Republicans in the first place with certain things, because they just want to delay, obstruct. And right now, in the era of Trump, bipartisanship is out the window for a little while.
Yeah, Rep. Bowman, I got to tell you, they feel like Democrats don't fight. And I'm not a big fan of Senator Tim Scott. I think the original Black Republicans of Reconstruction would be mortified by him. But here is Senator Tim Scott reneging on negotiating, from what I read, on the George Floyd Policing Act. He goes on TV and he lies about it and says that it defunds the police. And I know you aren't in the Senate, of course, but I felt like, when folks called in saying this, why aren't the Democrats calling him out? Why aren't the Senate? Why aren't they saying, listen, he lies, and more lies? And Senator Cory Booker is my senator. And I know he's a super nice guy, but I wanted him to go up, just blast him like, this guy is lying, and he's doing it there's no repercussions for it. And then he does it under the veil of, I am a Black man in the Senate, and I experience racism. I am a Black Republican. It just outrages me, and it outrages our audience that we have really a traitor who pulled a stunt. And folks feel like that the Democrats aren't fighting enough, especially in the face of someone like a Senator Tim Scott, where we're negotiating. What's your response to that?
I agree with that. The Republicans have taken over the airwaves with their nonsense and their lies and their misdirection and their alternative facts. Like they speak more on the House floor. They're more consistent in their messaging, even though it's a lie. But they're also insidious as well. Like they because it's Trumpism now. And under Trumpism, if this devolves into civil war, so be it. They don't care because they're all about power. So, for me, just speaking for myself, sometimes when people say idiotic things that are clearly lies, like I'm like, there's no need to respond to that because it's clearly BS. But I don't think that way anymore. Like now we have to respond to everything and go hard and do much better in communication and engagement and consistency while still being decent, just to like reassure the American people that we're not going to allow the insidious nature of Trumpism and the Republican Party to seep into the consciousness of the American people, because that's what's happening, and we're almost all caught up in that matrix, and we haven't up until this point pushed back hard enough. And I think when we pass the Build Back Better Act, it's going to give us a lot of momentum towards voting rights reform and other things that we can begin to take the narrative back, hopefully over the next several months into the midterms.
And Senator Tim Scott, I believe he's going to run for president. I really do.
He's going to get destroyed. I mean,
I don't know. I don't know that. There's a whole.
If he runs for president, I'll run for president myself just to destroy him, just to demolish him.
I imagine y'all in the debates. Listen, before you go, I must ask you this. Eric Adams, it appears that he is going to win. Of course, the Republican option is, whatever. But I got to tell you, I know you weren't a big supporter of Eric Adams. I wanted him on the show. He never came on. He didn't really come on Urban View, I don't think, at all. But I'm concerned, and I know some Black men specifically who are concerned, because I remember the stop and frisk years vividly. I was never arrested, but I was stopped often. I know you had terrible experiences. Eric Adams says that he wants to reinstate it. He wants to reinstate the plainclothes unit, which was shut down because it was violating constitutional rights. He'll be the second Black mayor of New York. So I'm struggling. I want to know where you are, because, I don't want the other guy, obviously, but I do have some concerns if he wants to reinstate stop and frisk, which was obviously didn't work and the stats prove it. I don't see a sensible way, a right way of putting in what I consider to be a Jim Crow law. But what are your thoughts?
I'm concerned about that as well. And, we lived through the Bloomberg years, and even prior to Bloomberg, just being Black in America, you just constantly, 9 times out of 10, 99 times out of 100, your engagement with the police is not going to be positive. Even when they let you go, it's freaking traumatizing, yo. So the trauma we're already living with COVID, the trauma we were living with before that, and now this is very, very concerning. My hope is, well, 2 things. One, I plan to remain engaged with the Adams administration so that we can talk about holistic approaches to public safety and public health. I think that's key. But it's really important for your listeners to remain constantly engaged as well, because again, it's accountability. Like that we as elected officials, we work for the people, not the other way around. So Mayor Adams has to be responsive to the people of New York City. And the more the people of New York City are applying pressure and accountability, whether it's in police reform, education, or something else, that is going to determine how he behaves on these issues. Because right now, when you look at the reporting in the Daily News, the reporting in the New York Post, the reporting on local media, as well as like what he's hearing in communities, like people don't feel safe because of, there has been a rise in violence, right? Yeah, like that is true, right? So that gives him cover to do things like this.
Exactly.
But as you and I both know, that at best will provide short-term solution and security. What needs to happen going forward is, how are we dealing with trauma in the real way? How are we dealing with miseducation in a real way? And how are we dealing with community neglect in a real way? Considering that the American Rescue Plan just helped the state and city to pass the most comprehensive, progressive budgets in the history of the city and state. How is that money now implemented? We have to hold him accountable to make sure that money is implemented in areas of mental health, housing, job training, and many other things.
Yeah, I often say I'm getting worried it's going to be Crime Reform Bill 2.0. I'm hearing the same narrative that was around in the early, I mean, we were young in the early 90s, obviously, but the crime is on the rise. The criminals are getting more dangerous. We got to do something. We got to be tougher on crime. Like you said, we have to really be engaged and be aware. I want to thank you for coming on once again, Rep. Jamaal Bowman. He is the congressman from New York's 16th District. Like you said, the key word is being engaged. So you have to be aware of redistricting, and you can go to nyirc.gov, nyirc.gov to submit testimony online, to submit testimony in person. This is a long game, and we got to make sure we're on it. How can folks follow you and support you on social media, Rep. Bowman?
Yes, so Jamaal Bowman NY is my social media handle. That's JAMAALBOWMAN NY. You can always go to bowmanforcongress.com if you want to support us. And then bowman.house.gov is the official government website where you can learn all about everything that's happening. But again, remain engaged, remain engaged. Don't just talk to friends and family at the Thanksgiving dinner table. Like, contact your Congress people, contact your city council, your state, call, write, follow up, because that moves us to do what needs to be done.